I never thought I'd see half the town show up to bury a man nobody actually liked. Ricky Halden wasn't a monster or anything. He was one of those loud, broad-shouldered firemen who made every story about himself. The kind of guy who'd tell you about a house fire he'd put out in '08 like it was Vietnam. Still, he'd been part of the fabric of this place. And in small towns, even the people you don't love feel like pillars. But the mood at his funeral wasn't grief. It was fear. There were no tears. Instead, people watched on, whispering, glancing over shoulders at shadows that weren't there. To the side, Mrs. Harlan kept repeating, "It's earlier than last time." Two older men stood behind me near the tree line, speaking low as the pastor droned on. It started again. 27 years like clockwork. Thought we'd get more time. I pretended not to hear. I grew up listening to this kind of nonsense. Stories about the black cycle, about the curse, about how every 27 years someone would die in a way that didn't belong to the world. To me, it was always just superstition layered over tragedy. Small towns loved patterns, even if they had to invent them. But this time felt different. Because nobody had an explanation for how Rick burned to death inside an empty grain silo. There wasn't an investigation, no state fire marshal, nothing. All he got was a closed casket funeral and a quick burial before anyone outside town could ask questions. And the silo itself? I drove past it on the way to the service. The whole structure had been reduced to a perfect black circle of ash on the ground, like someone had dropped a giant branding iron on it. Rick had been in the center. What was left of him anyway. After the service, people lingered in clusters, talking like frightened cattle. Then the whispering started. "It's the vault. The vault's waking up." That's when I knew I wouldn't sleep if I didn't see the sight myself. I waited until sundown, until the sheriff's car was gone and the road was empty, then drove out to what was left of Halden's silo. The fields were quiet, the air unnaturally still. The ash circle felt wrong. It didn't look charred in the way you'd expect, more like the ground had melted. I crouched, brushing my fingers across the surface. The concrete was glassy and smooth, fused into a dark, rippled shape. And in the center, where Rick had died, the scorch marks curved into an oval, wide at the ends, narrow in the middle, jagged around the edges, almost like teeth, a mouth, an open one. I stood slowly, feeling a cold bloom in my chest, like recognition, though I didn't know why. I left before my mind could make sense of what I'd seen. That night, I dreamt I was underground. I wasn't buried in dirt, buried in bone, in a coffin made of interlocking teeth. And above me, something massive exhaled, something waiting and hungry. I didn't go to work the next day. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that shape burned into the silo floor, those jagged edges, that impossible symmetry, like a fossil of something that had taken a bite out of the world. So, instead of clocking in at my job at the hardware store, I drove to the town museum. It was like an overgrown attic, cold, dusty, full of things nobody wanted to throw away or remember. I told the curator I needed to do some genealogy research. "The archives are downstairs," she muttered, barely looking up. "If anything bites you, it's not our liability." Nice. The archive room smelled like yellowing paper and mildew. Rows of metal filing cabinets containing stacks of old town ledgers and newspaper reels older than anyone alive in town. I started with obituaries. 1890s, 1910s, 1930s, 1950s. A pattern began to emerge before I even wanted to admit what I saw. Every 27 years, the death count spiked. An old man wiped out in a house fire, a pastor found hanged in his own church rafters, a child drowning in a lake during a drought. Just like the stories. Then I found the 1998 folder. It contained detailed council minutes, and they were terrifying. There were references to a selection committee and a recipient list. The names were blacked out with heavy ink strokes, but the phrasing was unmistakable. One entry read, "Consent acquired. The vault remains sealed." What vault? What consent? I flipped page after page, hands sweating, until I found a single note clipped to the inside cover. If the list is incomplete, notify the elders. No cycle can begin without unanimous selection. That was the first moment I felt something twist in my gut. Something had gone wrong this year. I pulled an old town survey map, spread it across the table, and started comparing landmarks mentioned in the minutes. A creek that dried up in the 60s, a road was rerouted in the 40s, an old settlement boundary. Then I found it. A place marked only once in tiny faded letters. Vault Mouth. It was deep in the woods, far beyond the main trails, so remote it wasn't on modern GPS. A place nobody talked about, a place meant to be forgotten, and, judging by the council minutes, deliberately avoided. I was stuffing the documents back into the folder when a chart slipped out. A folded piece of thick, brittle paper, looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. On it was a family tree of the original settlers of the town, with dozens of names and dozens of branches. Most of them were crossed out with red pencil. And when I saw my own last name, my stomach dropped. My family's branch wasn't crossed out. It was circled, hard, several times, deep enough to bring up the fibers of the paper. And next to it, written in the same red pencil, "Next to seal the mouth." The room felt suddenly smaller, the air grew colder, and the hairs on my arms stood at attention, sending chills down my spine. I stood there, staring at that circle, that message, feeling like a hand had reached out of the past and grabbed the back of my neck. Whatever was happening now, my family hadn't just been a part of it. We were at the center of it. There were only 2 elders in town who had lived through the 1971 cycle, and one of them didn't talk anymore. The other was Dolores Kint. She lived on a faded yellow house on Birch Lane, the kind of place that looked like it should have caved in years ago, but by miracle stayed standing. I'd seen her at the grocery store sometimes, pushing an empty cart, mumbling to herself. Some said she had dementia, but I also heard she watched her entire family die through a single October. I figured both could be true. I knocked on a door, but there was no answer. I was just about to leave when a shadow moved behind the curtains and the locks clicked. 1, 2, 3, 4. She opened the door just wide enough for one eye. "You're the Moorcroft boy," she said. I didn't correct her. I wasn't sure if she meant my father or me. Her living room smelled like dust, medicine, and old, damp carpet. She shuffled around in slippers, muttering, "Tea, tea. Do I make tea?" When I told her I had questions about the past, she stopped moving. Just stopped. Her back stiffened, and she turned her head in a way that made my saliva taste like despair when I swallowed. "What year is it?" she asked. 2025? She sucked in a sharp breath. "That soon," she whispered. She wandered to a recliner and sat down hard, hands trembling. I pulled the chair across from her. "Dolores," I said quietly, "I need to ask about 1971, about your family, about the deaths." She didn't react until I said the word. Vault mouth. Her eyes snapped to mine, clear as crystal, like the fog lifted all at once. "You should know that name," she exclaimed. "Only the chosen and the choosers know that name." "I found documents," I said. "Council notes from 1998, mentions of a selection committee." She let out a shaky laugh. "No one chooses anymore," she said. "That's why it's angry." Then her voice dropped to a rasp. "It doesn't want a person. It wants the choice. That's the pact." I swallowed. "What happens if there's no choice?" She leaned forward, gripping the edge of her chair with white-knuckled fingers. "If the town does not give, it takes, and it will keep taking until the mouth is full." Her eyes suddenly darted to the window, like she expected something to be peering in. Then her expression changed, went blank, fog rolled back in. She looked lost. "What were we talking about?" she murmured. "Do I know you?" I stood to leave, but before I could make it 2 steps, her hand shot out and grabbed my wrist, hard. Her voice was clear again, sharp, urgent. "Say it out loud, a name with intent. It listens." Then, like a switch flipped, her grip loosened and she sank back into the recliner, staring at the far wall. Her mouth moved silently, like she was praying to something that wasn't God. I left the house trembling. As I stepped onto the walkway, the sound of screeching tore down the street, then a horn, followed by a sickening metallic crack. About 50 yards away, a car had slammed into a telephone pole. The front end was crumpled like an aluminium can, steam billowed from the engine. But what shocked me wasn't the crash. It was the open driver's side door, swinging gently. No one was inside. There wasn't a trail leading away, no blood or body from the impact. A shiver crawled up my spine. This wasn't the first death. This was the beginning of something feeding. The map said it was called Vault Mouth, but the land around it had no name, no roads, just a thinning tree line off Route 19 and a path that felt like it hadn't been walked in decades. I parked where the road turned to gravel and followed the rest on foot, shouldering through brush, slipping down embankments, boots snagging on hidden roots. The air got heavier the deeper I went. Eventually, I found the fence, or what was left of it. Rotting wood posts spaced unevenly around a clearing, warped with crumbling barbed wire and rusted iron nails, half driven in, half bent outward. Faded signs dangled by one hinge, words long gone, but symbols still visible. Circles, spirals, a mouth full of triangles. Latin etched into the boards, almost burned in. Non elegimus carnem, carnem eligit nos. We do not choose the flesh chooses us. It wasn't just creepy, it felt deliberate, like a warning whispered by dead hands. I stepped over the boundary. The trees stopped, all life absent, the soil turned ashen. The center of the clearing was perfectly flat, ringed with pale stones half sunk into the earth. And in the middle was a hole. At first glance, I thought it was a well, but on closer inspection, it was a smooth, vertical shaft wide enough to drop a body into without folding it. The inside was black, no bottom in sight, and around the rim, the stone had been carved in a tight spiral, grooves that curved downward like something had dragged claws around the edge 1,000 times. Just clean, dry stone, and the faint hum of pressure, like the air was breathing in and out. I picked up a pebble, held it for a second, then dropped it in. Nothing. No click or bounce, just gone, like the earth swallowed it before it hit the bottom. Near the lip of the shaft, embedded in the ground, was a slab of metal, iron gone orange with age, bolted down with thick rivets, names etched across the surface in uneven, hand-carved rows. Dozens of them. I ran my fingers across the grooves, reading aloud. Many I didn't recognize. Then, near the bottom, one I did. Walter Moorcroft. My father. The last name on the list. My breath caught in my throat. He'd never mentioned this place, never said a word, but somehow he was part of it. He knew. I left the clearing as fast as I could without running, like turning my back on that hole too quickly might give it permission to reach for me. The sun was starting to set by the time I got home. I opened the door to my trailer, and there he was, sitting in my kitchen. No call or warning, just there. His eyes were sunken, shirt still half-buttoned, knees jittering. His voice came out flat and shaking. "You shouldn't have gone there." I hadn't seen him in months. We weren't estranged exactly. We just moved around each other like planets on a different orbit. He's only ever showed up when something has gone wrong. And something had gone very, very wrong. He looked older than I remembered, drained. His shirt was unbuttoned and crooked, hands shaking, eyes bloodshot with tiredness, like he'd been waiting for something. "Sit down," he said. I did, because the tone wasn't optional. He lowered himself into the chair across from me, elbows on his knees, breathing slow and heavy, like he had to convince his lungs to keep working. "I know what you've been looking into," he said. "The archives, Dolores Kind, the vault." Hearing him say it out loud felt like ice water poured down my spine. "Dad, what is it? What's in the vault?" He looked away, jaw clenching. Then he said the words that would ruin everything I thought I knew about this place. "The town isn't cursed. It made a deal." He rubbed his face with both hands. "Back in 1890, he said, the founders struck a pact with whatever lies under the ground. They call it the mouth, the deep, the listener. It doesn't matter what name you use." He swallowed hard. "We promised it a life every 27 years, just one, chosen willingly through the vote, and in return, it left the rest of us alone. Something horrible was happening to the settlers, something so horrendous it wasn't even recorded. The deal was the only way to survive. My stomach twisted. You're telling me this town has been sacrificing people? He didn't flinch. Willingly, yes. Always with consent, always someone who accepted it. A quiet death, a clean one, and the vault stayed sealed. I must have made a face because he added, You think they wanted to make a deal, that they didn't try leaving? He shook his head slowly. People did leave. In the early years, whole families packed up wagons and tried to outrun it. Didn't matter. Wherever they went, something followed. Things would start to happen. The crops would rot, the ground would go dry, children would get sick. And then he held up one trembling finger. One death, always one, something final, like the mouth needed to remind them, you can't cheat hunger. You can only feed it. He leaned back, jaw tight. That's why they settled it in 1890, not to keep people in, but to keep something from following them out. I shot to my feet in shock. I know what it sounds like, he snapped. I know, but you weren't here for the years when the vote didn't happen, when people doubted, when they resisted. His eyes had gone distant. Those years were hell. I paced the room, trying to process it all. So, what happened this time? I demanded. Why did the fireman die? Why are people disappearing? What changed? My dad leaned back and stared at the ceiling as if the answer was written there. This year, he said quietly, nobody could agree. I stopped moving. The council argued for months. Half the elders died off. The younger generation doesn't believe. They think it's all folk tales. He let out a bitter laugh. Turns out, belief doesn't matter. Responsibility does. Then, softly, there was no vote, no selection, no name offered. I felt my mouth go dry. So, the fireman was taken, Dad said. But it doesn't count. It wasn't a willing offering. He leaned forward, eyes burning. It has to be chosen, not just a death. The words sank into me like hooks, because suddenly the pattern made sense. The random vanishings, the crash, the way the air felt charged and wrong. The pact had been broken, the vault was hungry, and there was no offering to stop it. I sat back down slowly. He watched me, something unreadable in his gaze. Okay, I whispered. So, what now? If the sacrifice wasn't made, what does the vault do? For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then he inhaled sharply, like the next part hurt to say. Then, it's up to the collector. I frowned. What does that mean? He didn't let me finish. He looked at me with an expression I'd never seen on his face before. Terror, grief, and something like an apology. The collector isn't a person, he said. It's a role, passed down a bloodline. Every generation has one. His voice cracked. And if the town won't choose the sacrifice, the collector must. A cold pressure settled behind my ribs. No, I said. Dad, no, you're not saying. He closed his eyes, and then he said it, voice barely above a whisper, the words I didn't want to hear. It's you. After my father left, I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table thinking about the name etched into that rusted iron plate. Walter Moorcroft, my father, the previous collector, now passed on to me. And I couldn't stop thinking about the way he'd looked at me, like I was something he was sorry for, not something he loved. I knew he hadn't told me everything, not even close, so I broke into the locked footlocker he kept under the guest bed. He always kept it bolted shut, like he thought someone would try steal his old hunting gear. But I knew the combination, same one he used for everything. Inside, not weapons or tools, just journals. Stacks of them, weather-warped and yellowing, page after page in my father's tight, careful handwriting. Most of it was nonsense at first. Weather reports, council meeting notes, obituaries with names underlined and circled. He'd been tracking every cycle since I was born. But then the language changed. He stopped writing like a man and started writing like a witness. One page read, "It speaks in symbols now, dreams. The hum in the trees isn't the wind. It's waiting for its name to be spoken." Another, "When the collector is called, the chosen cannot offer themselves. The collector must choose. This is the pact, the old way, not by death, by right." The words collector and vaultmouth appeared again and again, sometimes capitalized, sometimes underlined in red, and next to them, crude diagrams of the vault, the shaft, the spiral, the concentric rings of trees around it, marked with strange glyphs. Some look like runes, others like teeth. One diagram showed a person standing at the edge of the vault, with arrows pointing inward, as if their presence activated something, opened something. Then came a section I hadn't expected, returning back to the style of a journal, detailing day-by-day beats of a tense time in the town. It spoke of apocalyptic symptoms, the lake changing color, the sky casting strange hues, and the wildlife losing their minds. People disappeared and families were torn apart, all because Walter, my father, could not choose. It mimicked the current time, the council not choosing and the decision falling to the collector, an impossible choice of life and death, one to die for many to live. That night, the vault came to me again in dreams, but this time I wasn't inside it, I wasn't falling. I was standing above it, at the edge, looking out at a crowd of people, kneeling, hands clasped, heads bowed, whispering something I couldn't hear. And I was speaking. My mouth moved. My voice was not my own. And the vault opened. It started with the birds. Every morning, my porch railing used to be dotted with crows, the smart, spiteful rascals that lined every wire in the town like little black judges. Then one morning, they were all just gone. That same day, a field of cows in the west end of town was found standing in perfect formation, heads lowered toward the ground, unmoving. Every single one of them, dead, bloodless, organs folded inside out like paper crafts. 2 nights later, I heard something boil, but not from the kitchen. from outside. I looked out and saw it was the lake, an entire body of water roiling like a pot left on too long. Wake's Pond, the old reservoir where we used to swim when we were kids, steamed for 10 hours straight. The water turned thick and red, fish floated to the surface, split open. The air changed after that, smelled wrong, sweet but spoiled, like rotted peaches or burnt teeth. Something was opening, and I wasn't the only one who noticed. The few remaining town elders, the one who still remembered how this thing worked, called a secret vote. They held it in the old stone house outside Mill Creek, the kind of place built with no insulation and too many locks. Only 6 of them showed up. They tried to vote, they tried to choose a name, but the vote didn't care anymore. It had waited, been ignored, denied its due. Now, it wanted me, not as a meal, as a mouthpiece. I didn't hear this secondhand. One of the elders, a retired judge named Halvesa, came to my door at dawn. His eyes were bloodshot, his knuckles scraped like he'd punched something harder than he expected. He sat on my porch swing, hands trembling as he lit a cigarette. "We failed it," he said. I didn't speak. "You're the last stop, you understand?" I just stared. He flicked ash onto the ground. "The collector exists for a reason, in case of breakdown. When the people can't choose, the blood must. You're not a sacrifice. You're the priest. Just speak a name with intent. That's all you have to do. If you need suggestions, I can..." I told him to get off my property. Told him I wasn't killing anyone for a town too cowardly to face its own history. "You're offering. That's different." I slammed the door, but the ground kept humming. That night, it got worse. The sky turned the color of old bruises. The clouds spiraled low and fast, like water being sucked down a drain. My neighbor's trees bled sap that smelled like iron. Dogs stopped barking. In fact, dogs stopped moving. A low bell began to ring from nowhere. No visible source, just there, vibrating through the soles of your feet. Something was uncoiling. The vault wasn't sealed anymore, not fully. At 3:21 a.m., my phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. Just one line. "Choose." By morning, Dolores Kint was dead. She'd been found in a bed, peaceful. No wounds, no trauma, but her face was smiling, hands folded like in a church pew. And between her palms, a yellowing card, handwritten, addressed to me. Name the Chosen. I knew where they kept the records. It wasn't a secret. The room was beneath the old town hall, not in the modern wing, but in the original limestone foundation, where the smell of mildew soaked into your tongue and the light buzzed like an insect was trapped behind your eyes. It was still unlocked. They hadn't even tried to hide it. Maybe they wanted me to find it. The selection ledger was a thick, cloth-bound book that looked like it belonged in a courthouse or a church. Heavy, frayed, smelling of dust and smoke and human oil. Inside, names. Page after page, each handwritten in looping cursive, some dated over a century ago. I flipped forward to the most recent year. This year. The first few pages were normal. Just names, birthdays, occupations, handwritten summaries of each candidate's community standing, financial status, and family size. Then I started seeing the red circles, suggestions for choice, a short list for them to vote on. Alongside them were stern judgments marked with phrases like approaching end of life, or minimal surviving kin, or historically low civic contribution. And then added on were notes, not from the elders. No, their handwriting was firmer, direct, but younger handwriting, softer language, correctional even. Marlene Gillard, 84. She still tutors at the library. Her great-granddaughter just got accepted to college. She brings hope to the family. This would destroy them. Thomas Harvey, 58, disabled vet. Still teaches woodworking, mentors troubled kids, has PTSD, wouldn't be ethical. Alicia Norris, 41, chronic illness. Started the grief circle after the 1998 death, still manages the town website, would send the wrong message to others with chronic conditions. George Amblin, 71, ex-convict. He served his time, runs the food pantry. His death would confirm every stereotype the town's trying to grow past. Every single name was paired with a counterpoint. Every sacrifice was dismantled by empathy. The deeper I read, the angrier I felt. Not at them, but how familiar it was. How easy it is to rationalize inaction when action feels monstrous. This wasn't corruption. It wasn't bloodlust. It was compassion. They had tried to be better, but better didn't stop the vault from waking. Better didn't boil the lake. Better didn't spare Dolores. Or was it ignorance? A new wave of leaders who wrote off tradition as ignorance, something to move past. The final page wasn't even finished, just a handful of names with red ink scratched through, like someone had grown furious and thrown the pen across the room. In the margin, one line of newer handwriting. There are no perfect deaths. Another in pencil. Then maybe we stop pretending it's worth choosing. And under that, scrawled in dark pen, pressure piercing through the paper. Then we die together. I closed the book. The vault was right. This wasn't a sacrifice anymore. It was a failure. That night, I dreamed of the spiral again. Only this time, I descended. No ladder, no rope, no footing. I just fell, gently, as if the air below me had turned to water. The stone walls pulled away as I went, becoming ribs, then roots, then rows of open mouths, all breathing together in rhythm. And at the bottom, where sound should have vanished into nothing, there was light, soft, living, like a heartbeat under skin. I didn't hear anything, but I felt it, behind my eyes, in my gums, in the marrow of every bone. The town agreed to the cost, it said. I turned, and around me were reflections, other towns, other timelines. Each one was different, and in all of them, the vault had gone unsealed. One showed spirals of fire coiling up into the sky, turning birds inside out in flight. Another, a town square full of kneeling people, mouths sewn shut with golden thread, trees grown backwards through their skulls. In one, the vault was gone, not sealed, but absorbed, as if it had eaten the land around it and kept growing. They were all worse than anything I could imagine, and every one of them had something in common. No choice was made. I woke up with my pillow soaked in sweat and my tongue heavy in my mouth, like it had been speaking without me. Despite all I had seen, in what I could call more a vision than a dream, I still couldn't pick one name. I didn't call a meeting, but they came anyway. One by one, the elders filed into my living room. Some looked resigned, some looked angry, some looked like they hadn't slept in days. And behind them, the younger council members slunk in with a stink of guilt on their faces. No greetings or small talk, just expectation. Judge Vesser was the first to speak. "It has to be now," he said. "We've run out of time." Another, Miller, ran a hand through her hair, shaking. "You've studied the list. You've seen the sky. You know what happens if we don't—" My throat tightened. "I'm not choosing," I said. "Not one, not any of them." A long silence. Then something changed in the room. The faces of the younger members, those who had written all the gentle notes in the margins, all the reasons why each circled name shouldn't be chosen, shifted. The sympathy drained, the humanity dimmed. A man named Devlin stepped forward, jabbing a finger at the ledger on my coffee table. "Just pick someone from the marked list," he snapped. "Anyone. Marlene is old, Norris is sick, Elroy's basically retired. It doesn't matter. Just choose." These were the same people who had written, "She's a pillar of her family. He volunteers more than anyone. She gives hope to the community." Now they spoke like accountants balancing a ledger. "It's between them or us," Devlin said. "Don't act like it's complicated." Something inside me curdled. I shoved the ledger away, sending it skidding across the floor. "If you want a name so bad," I said through my teeth, "pick one yourselves." "We can't," Vesser whispered. "It won't listen to us anymore. It only listens to the collector." "Well then, you're all screwed," I said, "because I'm not playing priest for a monster." The idea of getting blood on my hands to save these people, ready to condemn another, with a responsibility I didn't ask for, was too much. The room went dead quiet. Everyone stared at me like I'd just set the house on fire. But nobody said a thing. Nobody argued or moved. They just stood there, waiting, hoping fear would make me fold. And then, the door exploded inward. My father stormed in with the force of a man who had been running for miles, eyes wide, hair slicked with sweat. His voice hit the room before he did. "You stupid boy," he roared. "You think this is a joke? You think you get to refuse?" I thought he was just going to yell, maybe shove me, maybe try to scare me into it. I did not think he would tackle me to the floor. My head hit the hardwood so hard, stars burst behind my eyes. Before I could breathe, his hands were on my collar, dragging me up and slamming me back down again. "Say a name," he barked. "Just say the goddamn name." At first, I thought he was bluffing, losing control in panic. But the weight on my chest didn't lift, and his fists didn't stop. My vision blurred, white at the edges, my teeth rattled with each blow. Behind him, the elders stood frozen, not intervening, not helping, watching things play out, not knowing which side to take. Some horrified, some relieved, watching action they must have dreamt of doing, but didn't have the guts. My father leaned close, breath hot on my cheek. "You're supposed to keep it sealed. You're supposed to be better than this," he snarled. "I had to do this too. Just do it." Another blow. My skull screamed. "No wonder your mother left. No wonder I left. You were always weak, always a disappointment, just like now." He wasn't trying to scare me anymore. He was trying to kill me. My ears rang, blood filled the back of my throat, the world tilted sideways. I felt myself slipping, consciousness slipping, dissolving, like the vault was already tugging at me. And in my delirium, one thought surfaced. I didn't have to choose from the list. I could choose the one trying to kill me. My lips moved before I fully realized what I was saying. I whispered my father's name, barely audible, cracked, broken, but true. The second the consonants left my mouth, the weight vanished, gone. My father wasn't sprawled over me anymore, a soft death like a heart attack or stroke. He wasn't in the room, he wasn't anywhere. A moment ago, he was beating me into the floor. Now, there was only air and silence. A few of the elders gasped. One crossed himself. Another woman looked away, trembling. No one said a word, because they knew what I had done. And worse, they knew what it meant. The room emptied in minutes. No goodbyes, no reprimands, no condolences. Just fear. They fled like they expected the house to collapse the second they crossed the threshold. I was left lying on the floor, staring at the ceiling, my heartbeat hammering in my teeth. Eventually, I stood, walked to the window. The sky was clearing, the clouds unraveling, colors returning. The hum in the earth finally quiet. It was over. Just like that. My father was the sacrifice. The town was safe. For now. The town healed fast. That was the strangest part. In the weeks that followed, life returned to a rhythm. Not the same rhythm maybe, but something close enough to pass for normal. The sky lost its bruised hue, the trees stopped leaning in, the power lines stopped whispering. People got up and went to work, the butcher reopened, the school held a bake sale. The lake was still red, but no one talked about that. The selection committee resumed their meetings, quieter now, fewer members, and fewer words spoken when they left those rooms. Once I used to see them as elders, guardians, wise men and women holding ancient truths. Now, they looked like exhausted survivors, scared of what might come next. I never went back to their meetings. They never asked me to. But there was one thing left to do, one door I hadn't opened. My father's house sat just off the main square, tucked between two identical ranch-style homes. I'd driven past it 100 times without thinking. I don't know what I expected, but when I stepped inside, it was exactly what I'd feared. Sparse furniture, a sink full of old dishes, frozen dinners stacked like bricks in the freezer, a recliner with an ass groove too deep to undo, facing a TV tuned permanently to the sports channel. It was a life half-lived, lonely, mechanical, grey. I stood in that room for a long time. It smelled like dust, coffee, and a man who didn't know what to do with silence. And then I saw it. A folded piece of paper sitting on the coffee table. My name was written on the front in my father's blocky, stubborn handwriting. I opened it. If you're reading this, then I went through with it. I'm sorry you had to see it. Sorry you had to be a part of it. I didn't want that for you. Not ever. That's why I left. But I had to make sure you'd do it. I couldn't risk you freezing up the way the others did. I know you. I raised you. You were always the good one. Even when you were little, You gave away your Halloween candy to the kids who were too scared to trick or treat. You used to cry when you saw roadkill. That's the kind of heart you have. Big, honest, kind. But a heart like that won't save this town. It never has. I said things I didn't mean, did things I never wanted to do. You have to know that. I needed to make myself into the enemy. I needed to give you someone worth condemning. If you hated me enough to speak my name with weight, then you'd survive. And the town would too. That was always the deal. One name spoken with intent. That's how the mouth knows the offering is real. It had to be me. I was already halfway gone anyway. I've been watching the sky for years now. I could feel it, the teeth behind the clouds, the pressure in my bones. It was coming, and you were going to be the one it turned to. So I gave you something to aim at. Me. I'm proud of you, not because you did what I wanted, but because, even after everything, I think you hesitated. Don't let this town break you. You're not like the rest of them. Keep being the kind one, even if it hurts. All my love. Dad. I sat down in his chair. It didn't feel right, didn't fit me, but I sat there anyway. And I cried harder than I had in years. Not because he was gone, or because of what he did, but because I understood. And I hated that I understood.